Hello and good evening and welcome to the Comics Experience Graphic Novel Club for May of 2018. I can't believe it's 2018 sometimes. Isn't that weird?
That's weird.
And we'll talk about why that's even weirder in a minute. Our book this month is Bug by the ALLREDs. And we have exactly. Very good. You're better at this than I am. And we have here with us live and in person, we have Lee ALLRED, we have Laura ALLRED, and we have Michael ALLRED. Ladies and gentlemen, the ALLREDs. Or some of you, there are many more. Yeah. Great book, right? You guys, yeah. A lot of fun. Fantastic books. So let's talk about this. Let's talk about your career in comics. Now, one of the things that you reminded me of on Twitter that I knew but I'd actually forgotten because it's been that long was Mike actually did his very, very first sighting in a comic shop ever. Maybe signing ever? Not just in a comic shop?
If I might have, signing. Nobody was...
Right, okay.
I think we did a small comic book show in Portland. I don't remember if it was before or after we came here.
Okay.
So it was definitely our first signing.
Yeah.
Because it was the first time people actually asked me to sign something.
Yeah. So this was in 1990, back when Mike was doing graphique musique, which is so obscure that probably almost none of you know it, Seth, but I don't know if any of the rest of the room has ever read those comics, which were not in print at all.
I don't think so.
Yeah.
And we had just moved from Europe, so that's why it's got that kind of hidey-tidy title.
So yeah, that's that day. That's 28 years ago. You did your first sighting ever here in this store, over there, and now here he is with the Graphic Novel Club. So I'm actually, this makes me feel both old and really wonderful.
You look exactly the same.
No, I'm considerably heavier. I'm considerably heavier. Thank you though. So comics. Why comics? Why do you do comics? Why is it comics that you do? And we're gonna look at Lee. That's what he did, at least.
Well, I do both comics and I also write science fiction. Simply, I dabble in both. I do comics because I enjoy it. They're fun. I grew up as a kid reading comics and had so much fun reading them that writing them is just more fun.
Yeah. Do you what was the first comic that you remember reading that burned itself in your brain?
The very first comic I ever read was one of the Batman annuals, I think number 3 or 4. It's the one with where Batman marries Batwoman.
Okay.
And that's one of the stories reprinted in it. But the very first comic I ever owned was a World's Finest comic where it's the two little brats of Superman and Batman. They're on a teeter-totter, and Super Brat is holding a Bat and won't let him down on the teeter-totter. I think it's 163 or something like that.
Yeah.
And I just remember staring at the cover the night I brought it home as the sun was going down, all the reds and the blues, and if you would just fade it to the same type of gray. But that's how long I stared at.
How many ALLRED kids were there? Just the two of you or more?
We have a younger brother.
Younger brother, okay. And so
he's as far as kids are, when you're 1 year old, a 2-year-old feels old.
Sure.
He's 4 years younger than me, so he kind of didn't really share the experiences Lee and I did.
Okay.
We're less than 2 years apart.
Okay. And did you guys fight over the comics? Did you?
We were too busy trying to keep our parents from taking them away to fight.
And I wouldn't even know what a comic book was if it wasn't for him. So they were always in my life because of him, and he always had this amazing taste.
Yeah.
And I would buy, when we were allowed to go into a store on a trip, a market, drugstore, and go pick out some comics so we'd be quiet in the back seat.
Yeah.
I would buy,
Right.
He would buy all the cool stuff.
Okay.
And so ultimately I'd be going after his stack.
Okay.
No fights, but I eventually learned I needed to see what he was buying before I then selected what I was buying.
Okay.
And my taste developed from there.
Right. What's the first comic that you remember that is in your heart? Remember? Not necessarily the first thing you read, but like the first thing that's like,
Well, my earliest memory, Lee hates hearing this,
You tell it all.
but my earliest, I can't think of it. I'm sure that I have earlier memories, but the earliest clear memory I have, he knocked me off a table and I woke up in the hospital.
He didn't knock you off a table. He wanted you to dance on a table.
He wanted me to dance faster, faster.
Do you remember it different?
I was trying to get him down before he hurt himself.
responsible older brother. No, that's good.
But I woke up in the hospital, and when I woke up, my the bed was blanketed with comic books, and Lee could remember what some of them are, and so recently repurchased one, which was an action comic. But the first comic I remember seeing on the stands was, and it was an X-Men. I think it was 30 something. Sorry, I'm not as, but Spider-Man is hanging into the cover.
Okay.
So it's an early, very early X-Men comic book, and I remember that image captured me. But
And how about you, Laura? What did you have a background in comics?
have you ever bought a comic book?
Funny. I didn't really get. I would buy Mad magazine growing up and stuff, but I didn't really get into comics more until Mike introduced him to me when his friend Charlie Custis introduced him to him, like Watchmen. I think that was the
Reintroduced me.
reintroduced you because he's like, you got to see what's happening now in comics, and
Why did I stop reading comics?
because Gwen Stacy, wait, did I say it right? She died.
She was killed. Murdered. My crush was killed, and I just cold turkey stopped buying comics.
And so Mike's friend Charlie Custis started showing us all this amazing stuff, and that's when I started.
Mid-80s.
Yeah, that's when I started getting into it more.
Where this was when you were still in Europe, no, or when you came
I was
back?
teaching
this was in
television
Air Force
production at the Air Force Academy.
Okay.
And I know exactly when it was because Watchmen had like 3 more issues to go.
Okay.
So that, and he gave me Dark Knight Returns.
He kept giving Mike all these
Frank Miller,
books.
Daredevils.
And Mike's like, I gotta read them because
Well,
they're expensive.
I was doing these life-size head busts and paintings.
Right.
So he knew I was an artist, and he knew I used to love comic books.
Yes.
And we'd go to the movies together. As my buddy that we'd go see movies, and he was like, "You've got to see what's happening." Oh, and also I was writing a screenplay.
Yeah.
And so it's like, draw your movie. You don't have to like worry about, just draw it.
Yeah.
And so because he just dumped all these on me, I felt a responsibility to read them. And all the ones I mentioned, like Frank Miller's Daredevil, and what really knocked my socks off was Mr. X. Give me the first 4 issues, which the Hernandez brothers did. And it had this glossy, high-end beauty to it that you'd open it up and it didn't have an ad. It had a double-page credit spread.
Yep.
Very cinematic and
very different than anything else that was on the stands.
yeah.
Oh, I loved it. It lit me up. I loved that.
Yeah, so we were just really getting into this together. So I was sharing this passion with her as I was reintroducing myself to comics, and really went nuts for the Hernandez brothers. Steven Seagal was he's one of the Man of Action co-created Ben 10, Big Hero 6. He's the first comic pro I ever met. He was in Colorado, and
His first book, Kafka, wasn't it? His
yeah,
first book?
that had just come out, and so at the comic shop, somebody said, "Hey, Steve Seagal's in the back," and look, and the guy was like signing all his comic books,
Right.
Just like him by himself,
Yeah.
up in the back, just signing all his books. And I thought, wow, that's cool. And so I, of course, wanted a signed comic book and started talking and told him that I was thinking of. Or I had started drawing my screenplay, which became Dead Air, my first published work. It's a graphic novel from Slave Labor Graphics. But Steve was very much a mentor and told me different things, how it was done, how I would submit work, and began doing that. And he was also my co-creator of a series called Jaguar Stories, the first thing I actually got paid for from a company called Kamiko, which went bankrupt before any of our stuff came out. And I even recently wrote a Ben 10 with Steve.
Oh, cool.
So we've remained really great friends, and I always value everything that he did. But I brought all that up because I shared my passion for this Mr. X comic book. And he said, oh, if you like the Hernandez brothers, you will love, or if you like Mr. X, you will love Love and Rockets.
Yeah.
And he turned me on to Love and Rockets, and the skies opened. It was amazing. And that's what taught me that there are no rules.
Yeah.
You can just do what your passion is.
Yep.
And hopefully you'll find an audience for that. And that's really what's kept us going ever since.
Yeah. I mean, Love and Rockets at the time was kind of amazing because it was regularly serialized, ongoing characters, but it had no genre trappings of anything.
No. And
No.
one issue
No
might
life.
have 3 genres in it.
Yeah.
Yep.
It was incredible and invigorating, and I passionately sought out every issue.
Yeah.
Even when we were visiting her parents, she's from Orange, California, 4 miles from Disneyland, and John Koukasakis, as a Fredonia Funny Works, was there and actually got the first self-published Love and Rockets there, which was like finding treasure.
Yeah.
And the 3 brothers mean a lot to us. We went to Mario's wedding.
Nice.
They know how ridiculously passionate I feel about them. But I have everything. If it's a calendar, a pen, anything that they've done, I immediately get it. They're a real touchstone for me.
Yeah. Did you study illustration in school? You didn't have any intention of being a comic artist at that point?
No, at that point, it wasn't a consideration. I thought maybe I could do record album covers or something. And so I was an art major in college, but then quickly was terrified that how am I going to make a living at this? I have no idea. And our childhood friend, his dad owned a radio station. And so I thought, well, I can get a job there. In fact, had a summer job there. So I switched my major to broadcasting. And that's how I eventually became a TV reporter and AFRTS and with the Air Force. But my hobby eventually got to the point where it looked like I could make a living at it.
Yeah.
And so
At what point was that, do you think?
well, it was when Steve sold the Jaguar stories.
Okay.
And that was late 89. And so
Yeah, I just got to Germany, and you told me I'm getting out. You're gonna have to get a job.
But this paid. It was a page rate from Kimiko, and it was very generous, especially for somebody like me who my first book, Dead Air, hadn't even come out yet.
Right.
But Steve got this. It was a 12-issue series, so that was 12 months of employment.
Yeah.
And so it was like, okay, let's move back to the States.
Yeah.
I'm going to do this full time, and I did. But a few months in, the money stopped coming.
Right.
And Matt Wagner at the time was doing stuff with them, and all of these people were like, "Have you gotten paid yet? Have you gotten paid?"
And Dan Schutz, Bob Schreck, they were all with Kimiko, weren't they?
And left to go to Dark Horse.
Yeah.
All that stuff was happening right after we got back to the States, and we're doing this full time.
Yeah.
And she did get a job. And for the first year, it was kind of scary. But then one of Matt's friends, Bernie Moreau, did it, Grendel, and he and I collaborated on an epic, Marvel epic. It was their creator-owned imprint at the time, a book called The Everyman. And that paid really well. And so little things like that kicked along. Matt Wagner turned Neil Gaiman onto my stuff. So I got to do a Sandman.
Yep.
So every time it looked like I might need to get a job bagging groceries, something else happened. And then in 92,
Plus, you worked all the time. I mean, he was always really good at that.
but Kevin Eastman, who co-created the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, had all this money and had an idea to do what we called the Apple Records of comics, Tundra. And I had created a character called the Spook, and I was in Oakland at WonderCon. I'd made a T-shirt, a glow-in-the-dark T-shirt of the Spook, a dummy book, and he
T-shirts.
he saw it and was like, "Well, what's this?" And I explained the concept of it. It was kind of like Frankenstein's monster in a superhero costume.
Yeah.
That's the elevator pitch.
Yep.
And he was like, "Let's do it." And what I later discovered was a lot of the bigger names that were doing stuff for Tundra weren't producing. And he had this rollout plan that, and he had slots to fill. So I took my work ethic and did 3 40-page issues in less than 3 months.
Yeah.
Did a flip action corners for him. It's like, this is my thing.
Those are cool.
And he had this advertising budget to promote it, and it was the first really big break that I got.
Yeah.
And the second break I would consider when Frank Miller and the Legend guys invited me into their group when nobody knew who I was. So those were 2 huge step ups that, you know, if I ever have the opportunity to help somebody with that kind of break, I always remember that.
Yeah. If anything, Mike's really kind of underselling the wonder and majesty that was Tundra, because Kevin Eastman had literally piles of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle money that he didn't know what to do with.
He bought Heavy Metal Magazine.
He bought Heavy Metal Magazine. He bought a Batmobile, as I remember.
Yeah, from the first Tim Burton movie.
Yeah. I mean, literally, he had so much money, and he was idealistic about it. He really wanted to move comics forward because
He opened a museum.
His own creators. He wanted to promote the creators.
Yep, because he wanted people to have the opportunities that they lucked into. And I always thought that this was a wonderful thing. But we find out that with perfect freedom, a lot of people don't work. It's really, really interesting. If you go, I'm going to pay you $20,000 up front to draw the comic book you've always wanted to draw your entire life, a lot of people won't actually draw it. They'll instead go and hang out in bars and talk about it. I mean, it's not these people are bad or anything. It's just you take the struggle off of it, maybe, and it becomes too easy just to not do the work. And so Tundra was bleeding money. I mean, it was kind of epic. They went through millions and millions of Kevin's money.
The Comics Journal actually did an interview with Kevin Eastman, and in the interview, they criticized him for paying me too much money. Like, why are you giving this guy that page right advance? You know, and so it was.
Well, no, you were one of the few people who was actually producing.
Thank you.
Yeah.
One thing Mike is not is a procrastinator.
Yeah.
He not on anything will he procrastinate. Even while I'll be sitting in my studio and he'll walk by and like, shouldn't you be working?
That's not true. I've never said that.
That's funny.
That's true.
So did you study art at all?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was I used to play piano. My mom always had us do something, so I was playing piano and I didn't like it at the age of 8. And so I asked her if I could take painting lessons, and so she let me do that. Then that's where I met him. I did art in college. But yeah, so I started painting when I was 8.
Okay.
But when we got married, I stopped doing anything, and because we had 2 little kids, and he'd always say, you got to do something. You can't just not do anything.
Little kids came a little later after all that.
Yeah. But
Tell the story the way she wants to.
No, but he's like, and then he was doing the black and white, and I said, if you ever go to color, I'll paint them for you.
Yeah.
And she did.
Yeah. Okay.
He held me to it.
And how and what was that like?
It was fun. What do you mean? Like,
Well, no, I mean, so did how did, because comics are different than doing a painting, and coloring someone else's work is different than painting, certainly.
well, I thought it was fun. And then, Mike has a color deficiency, so it.
That's an odd thing to call it.
Well, you're not color blind if you have a red-green color deficiency. So I always said, if you ever go to color, I'll paint your comics, which we started at the beginning, but then now everything's on the computer and Photoshop.
Yeah. That's probably been an interesting transition. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, my first time on my own computer was Superman, Madman, Hullabaloo. And that was the very first time I got this massive computer. We spent like so much money on this, and every time you saved, you'd have to wait like 5 minutes. Remember that?
Yes.
How did you submit the work at that point? Because I can't imagine you were uploading it.
Were they zip drives?
Oh my gosh, that was so long ago. Yeah, 'cause by that time,
Better than floppies.
well, floppies don't hold it. Floppies don't hold anything, and then the zip drives held like a book.
Yeah.
And that was crazy. It was like huge files.
Yeah. And you'd have to like FedEx the zip drive to New York. Yeah.
Oh, and everything was FedEx back then. The artwork, like sending it to the letterer, and our letterer at the time smoked these cigarettes that we don't know what exactly brand they were, but Mike would have to lay all the pages out, let them air out because his eyes would start running and he couldn't eat the pages. That was Sean Conant. We finally told Sean, we go, what cigarettes do you smoke? And he felt so bad. He's like, oh, I didn't know. You pretty much open the FedEx box and smoke would come out. But now all the art, everything stays in house. Nothing leaves.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a very different world.
Yeah.
Very different world. Lee, did you study writing?
No, thank goodness. If you want to be a writer, don't study at college.
Yeah.
Stay away from the English department. No, I just started writing science fiction on my own.
Okay.
Just got into a group of writers, and what they were doing looked fun, so I started doing it too.
Yeah. Nice. Are you mostly doing short stories, novels?
Yeah, I do short stories.
Yeah.
I do short fiction. That's kind of what I started doing and what I enjoy doing.
Yeah. Yeah. So maybe let's talk about the genesis of Bug. Where did it come from? Wait, it came from Jack Kirby. But where did you guys get involved with this? How did this come together?
They have a good story.
Lee can explain why we have this mutual passion, especially for Bug.
When we were kids, we took guitar lessons from Ray James?
James Ray.
James Ray. I always get it backwards. And in his waiting room, he ended up stacked, dog-eared stack of comic books. And one of them was Bug. Well, one of them was the issue of New Gods with the one where Bug premieres. Yeah. And we really wanted these comic books, and we tried to make deals with the guitar teacher. Finally he gave in after weeks and weeks of us hounding him. He let us have. The comics are getting so old that he was needed to go out and buy some new ones anyway. But Bug was the character on New Gods that we fell in love with. So ever since then, he's just been part of the.
And you kids should know, we didn't have comic book stores. So any comic book you could find, whether it was at a friend's house, it was a precious thing. Because you either got it at the drugstore when it was new, and if you tried to collect a series, and you missed it,
yeah, that was it.
You were done. Yeah. And so for all of my childhood, I never had complete runs of anything. Yeah. So individual issues were incredibly precious, and that first appearance of Bug was incredibly precious.
And we didn't see the next issue where the last issue.
We didn't know if there was one.
Yeah, we never saw it, so we had no idea.
So for all I knew, there were 100 issues of Bug. I didn't know that there were only 2.
Right.
And then it wasn't until Cosmic Odyssey that he appeared really significantly again, and then they killed him off.
Yeah.
So and I love that series, Cosmic Odyssey, and Bug he saves the universe in that series. So more reason to have this great affection for this character.
Yeah. All right, so how did the pitch come together? What was the notion of pitching a very obscure character to DC to start running with it, and then also you two working together?
Well, it's always a blast working with Lee. It just feels like on summer vacation we'd always do this route through all the relatives. And these grandma and grandpa, and we would always be given paper and pencils and color pencils and whatever, and we'd make our own comics, and that's how we kind of spent a lot of time in our summers making comics. So when Lee and I work together, it completely amplifies that feeling, or just the joy of storytelling, making comics, drawing pictures, and. So whenever I have the option to work with Lee, I jump at it. And in this case, for years, Gerard Way and I had talked about different things. And Shelley Bond would always try to get us together on this project or that project. And Shelley Bond was an editor at Vertigo. First editor I ever actually had for the Jaguar stories at Kamiko.
Yeah, wow, yeah.
So she was Shelley Robert. So
Comics is small.
So Gerard starts Young Animal.
Yeah.
It's like, hey, what would you like to do? And so I just started throwing, well, how about this? How about this? And how about this? And for whatever reason, every pitch that I came up with had a way to put Bug in it. And so finally, it was like, well, let's just make it a Bug series.
Right.
And Lee got the brilliant idea. When Jack Kirby worked at DC Comics, he was on fire. If you look at the stuff that he was doing, I don't know how he did it.
Yeah.
So you're looking at New Gods, Forever People. He took over Jimmy Olsen, Superman's pal, and then later Commandy and the Demon, but also Mr. Miracle. So he was just doing all this stuff, and at the same time, he was working a little bit here and working a little bit there, and other things where he had Dead Man was in a robot body. These one-shot specials, first issue specials.
Specials, Atlas and Manhunter.
So there were all of these stories.
Max's Danger Street?
Yeah.
Well, at the end of
Mike
the
was let me put that one.
No, I was like, I don't want to
Man.
drill line there.
They're not all great characters.
Olmec, another series, and what these all had in common was they didn't have endings. Olmec didn't have an ending.
Yeah.
There was no resolution with Dead Man and the robot body. And these DC first issue specials would always end with, if you want more, kids, write in. There was never more.
Right.
And so there were all of these cliffhangers, and Lee, who has this encyclopedia of knowledge in his head of comics, he can tell you when this was done and who did that and when was that. He was like, let's make this one big Jack Kirby love letter.
Yeah.
And tie a bow on all of these stories through Bug. And so we just sent him on this adventure through these different dimensions and multiverses, and we did just that. We provided endings to all these Jack Kirby stories.
Yeah. What is it about Kirby that makes him so special?
How long do we have here?
all goddamn night long.
It's magic, really. When it comes down to it, he really, you can't over exaggerate how special this man was. His entire history, he was constantly evolving. He was constantly looking for new, exciting ways to tell stories. He was constantly, whoever he collaborated with, they would do their best work. And he had this incredible work ethic, this energy, where he just drew and he drew and he drew. He didn't ink his stuff. He very rarely did he ever ink his stuff. So it was a lot. He was a very, very fast penciler, and he was an amazing storyteller. He loved telling stories, and you could argue this, and I have, that a lot of the stuff that some of his co-creators get credit for are mostly Jack's stuff, and you can see the evidence in that. And he was such a humble man that he didn't demand the credit for a lot of the stuff he did. Because he just wanted to do this. He really loved spending all his time just drawing page after page after story, and I think because of that, because of this energy, that energy shows up on the page. And a lot of people, when they first see Jack Kirby's work, they see there's an abstractness to it, especially his later stuff, and it's not on the surface aesthetically beautiful. And when you get used to it, or start to understand it, it then does. So there's this extra. It's like music that's an acquired taste. When you first hear it, it's like, I don't know if I like that, but then you hear it again, it's like, wait, there's something special about that. And then you hear it again, it's like, this is fantastic. Kirby's like that, where the more you bring in, the more alive you get with it, and you feed on it, and you're inspired by it, and it's a deep well that can just be tapped and tapped again. I'm not saying directly ripping his work off, but you look at it and you look at his work, and it's like, oh, I want to do something like that, and then your brain goes somewhere else, and it's like, so that's what Kirby is for me. Is just kind of this shaman. There's this energy, this source, the center of the universe of everything I love about comic books. And you can just kind of visit that center of the universe, and all of a sudden you want to go somewhere else, and you have this quick ray of light you can jump onto and take you there. That's, for me, that's what Kirby is. It's that cosmic magic.
Yeah, I agree. Lee, do you have anything to add to that? All right, I just,
How could you say anything more than that?
I sit in a room by myself all day.
Sure.
When I'm given the opportunity to talk, and she won't let me.
What do you mean I don't let you?
It's like, shh, let's make love.
That's what just.
Yeah, the thing I really admire about Kirby is just how just sheerly productive the man was, and it's a lot of artists of his generation were like that, though Kirby clearly surpasses most of them. They lived through the Depression. A lot of them were Jewish, and so couldn't get jobs illustrating like at magazines, which is where all the money was in illustration. And so the comics, which was a disreputable business, half run by the mob, was really the only work that they could get in order to provide for their families. They had to be prodigious in what their output was. I mean, I believe at one point Kirby was turning out like 6-8 pages a day, and not hack work. I mean, like solid, amazing, and this fount of ideas that never stopped.
He was interested in everything.
Yep. And even his weakest stuff always has some really cool original idea in it. Comics could use a lot more of that, I think. A lot more of that kind of pushing things and being creative and doing that thing. You're in a really interesting place in your career that you've done, and I would argue you're probably most famous for really creator-owned material. But between Madman and iZombie, which is a television show, which is a thing, and then kind of doing this retro superhero thing, and I'm wondering if you can speak to that dichotomy at all.
Every time our dad was a psychologist, so there's a lot of self-analysis that kind of naturally happens, but I try to avoid that when it comes to creative things. And what's that expression? Follow your bliss, but a lot of it is accidental and incidental. So if an idea happens, I attack it. If an opportunity to collaborate happens and it excites me, I attack it. And so there's not really been any real plan other than just doing stuff that keeps me excited.
Sure.
And I've been really lucky with the people I've worked with because they're all very exciting.
I think my question was more, is there a difference doing creator-owned work versus doing company work? Does it bring a level of satisfaction one way or another? Does it matter as long as you're feeling good about the work?
It does matter, and there is a difference. But the main difference is for me personally, the main difference is financial, pros and cons. It's more the business side of things is different. But what I call my Madman Universe stuff is the stuff that's very personal to me, and it's the stuff that fortunately I've been successful at, but it isn't anything I would do because it would financially reward me. So it's stuff that I just have to do because I have to have that creative stream for my most personal inner stuff. And Madman and the satellite creations of Madman do that for me. But when I'm working with somebody else, whether it's Lee or Peter Milligan or Gerard Way or, Chris Roberson, Dan Slott, Jerry Dugan, Chip Zdarsky, there is, like, I did one issue of Daredevil with Mark Waid, for instance, and that was every bit as fulfilling and satisfying as anything I've ever done personally. It's two different things. It's like if you're in a really cool band, but you also have to do your solo project stuff too.
Right.
So the creative satisfaction is very similar. Yeah, it really. I think the main difference. If I could just set aside my most personal stuff, which I need to do every once in a while, it's all very much in the same stream. It's being creative, and I get a thrill from the collaborations that I don't get from my own personal stuff. And sometimes it can be frustrating, but most of the time it's like a party.
Yeah.
And it's a party I want to be at. And it's energizing, and it keeps me going, Yeah. The recent run I did with Dan Slott with Silver Surfer was the first time, or the longest time I did that many issues without a guest artist or villain artist. And I needed that. Yeah. And Marvel was really, really cool about not rushing us. And I really appreciate that because there is still a sense of ownership and a selfishness that is on par with the stuff that I own and control and comes from only me. Yeah. So that creative energy is very similar, but everything is very different. Just like songs are different, the projects are all different, but it's still music. Yeah. And so really, it boils down to the business side of stuff when it comes to really different things. Yeah. With Madman, for the first time since 1995, I got all the rights back. Yeah. Universal Pictures picked it up, and then it went to Robert Rodriguez and Dimension, but I wasn't putting the energy and focus into making that take off. Sure. And something I learned from Frank Miller was that you don't need to use comic books as a stepping stone for more fame with a film or a TV show. That comic books in and of themselves are the ideal. They are the be-all, end-all. Agreed. And it took him years and years. In fact, me hooking him up with Robert to get Sin City made, it took Robert seducing him to pull him away from comic books in that way. Because Frank he had everything he needed. He had enough money. He had enough fame. So why do a movie if he gets everything he needs from a comic book? And that was a real eye-opener for me, and I had to ask myself, where am I most fulfilled creatively? Yeah. And so it's all of those things. And so anything that gets me excited, that's the path I personally will take. So all of that is energizing and fulfilling, and even whether it's favorite characters, established characters, other people's creations, if I can find an enthusiasm for it, then it's the same enthusiasm I have for doing my own stuff. So it does, and you set all that aside, then it boils down to the business side of things. And I can't make any decisions on a Silver Surfer movie. Sure. And even characters that I create, like my Marvel Mutant characters that I created, I don't have the control of those either. I can be rewarded by those. Like I have the biggest movie in the world right now is Deadpool 2, and it has the things that Peter Milligan and I created in it. And but we didn't make that happen. Right. And you don't have any say in it. Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. But that isn't what I do. Sure, of course. So, but there is kind of that, hey man, I would have liked to be, on Stephen Colbert talking about the movie. Sure. Because of my affection for those characters. Sure. But I bet Stephen would love to talk to you too. Honestly, I was like, God, seems like a giant fanboy to me. And Seth Meyers is really great too. Yeah. He's had Matt Fraction on and stuff. But no, that's all cool. Yeah. But again, it isn't why you do it. Of course. And so we're really happy to just kind of be among our friends and family and have this creative outlet. And we don't need that pat on the back from the rest of the world. Yeah. What we do need is enough success to continue doing what we love doing. And so that's really the most important bar to cross. And so we're always hoping that we can just keep doing it.
Yeah.
We don't need to be, famous or crazy rich or anything.
I remember when Image started, Eric Larson said something along the lines of, now the creators can own their own work and benefit from it. Why would anybody do their best work working for a company?
Oh, well, I could answer that.
Yeah, sure.
Because you love doing it. And like I just did a Spider-Man annual. I love Spider-Man.
Right.
I did an Adam Warlock book with Jerry Dugan. I love Adam Warlock. And so the reason you wouldn't do your best work is because you have no interest or affection for the work that you're doing. If you have interest and affection for the work that you're doing, you're going to do your best work.
Right.
Also, I have a crazy need to, whatever I'm working on now, to be the best thing I've ever done.
Yeah.
And I'm constantly working to do what I guess you could call deathbed projects.
Yeah.
Something that would be, okay, that's all I needed to do. Dead Air, the first thing I ever did, the motivation for that was I wanted mom and dad to see, hey, look what I made, put it on a shelf and something you could be proud of. But there's always this, it's not good enough.
Yeah.
And so you strive to get better at it. And so you always want your next thing to be better, to have some kind of progression, some way of moving beyond what you've done before. And a lot of times it can be nostalgia. You can take a big step back in order to move forward.
Sure.
And so when I visit something like Adam Warlock, it's like, how do I personally move forward with this while at the same time have a really great time working on this character I have a lot of affection and respect for.
I think he, and I don't know that I want to speak for him necessarily, but I think that what he was talking about was not necessarily doing your best work, but like creating new ideas.
Yeah.
Which is something that you guys did on Ecstatics. I mean, that was all new ideas, all
it's huge.
fresh characters and new characters. You don't control those characters. If they're in the movie and they give you some money for it, which hopefully they did, but they're doing it out of the goodness of their heart as opposed to something that's contractually obligated to you, right?
Well, I would like to take a poll as to what people think is what we deserve to get, financially,
Right.
Because everybody has different ideas about that.
Sure.
I know what I think I deserve for something that I created.
Yeah.
But some people think, you only did this much, or it only did that, and it's almost unrecognizable to what you did. There's all these different arguments. But going back to what Eric Larson said and supporting that idea, all you got to do is look at Savage Dragon. You know exactly what he's talking about. That's his baby. You'll see him do these other things, and you can see that he's doing what I'm talking about. He loves Fantastic Four, so he did that World's Greatest Comic thing. That was really cool.
Yeah, but he didn't bring any new characters in. He didn't create anything new for that.
And that's an argument there. And you have to ask yourself, is enough enough? And also, if I am choosing to work for somebody and not retaining complete control of these new creations, does that justify me giving them something that's not as good as I could do?
Yeah.
And for me, it's the same amount of people, if not way more people, are going to see this entity. And I want it to be as good as it can be because it still has my name on it. It's still associated with my creative output. It's still going to be in my catalog. So it's really important to me to it be the best thing I ever did.
Yeah.
And then if I can do something better with my own stuff, which I do completely own and control, and that has a lot to do with it too, because I have my first success was with stuff I own and control. So I felt a little freedom in like, I'll do some stuff with Marvel and DC. Because I don't feel like I have to prove anything. And I also feel like I can always create something new, and I do. Yeah. That I own and control.
Yeah.
So it's like having the best of all worlds.
Right.
Eating your cake and having your cake and eating it too. So I'm really happy and comfortable in creating these areas of freedom is how I look at it.
Yeah.
I have these options to do this and that. And I don't feel like if I do this, I'm selling out because I know I'm doing something. And
the pure love you have for what you're doing, you do it because you love it, not just.
That's my question. Why would you do anything if you don't love doing it?
Sure, exactly.
And the what's
life is short. There's not enough time to waste on stuff that you don't believe in.
I don't know the exact expression, but if if you love what you do every day, you never work a day in your life. And so when everybody says, "Oh, I really love your work," I'm like, "Work? That's kind of a weird word, because I don't feel like I do any work." She'd argue that, but it's so I'm so grateful every day that I get to do what I get to do. And that's why I just want enough success where I can keep doing it, and maybe leave something for my family when I bite the big one.
Well,
Bite the big one. I don't know if I like that.
you had a thought there. It looked
I
like.
was just going to point out that there are 3 new characters we created. So
Yeah, and you didn't feel any hesitation. Well, right, but DC gives officially gives incentives. That if there's ever a television show, you will get some money for sure.
Yeah, and in case anybody takes what I've said today as ammunition to criticize Marvel proper actually cares quite a bit.
Sure.
And people like Joe Quesada are doing their absolute best to make sure that creators are given their credit and and appropriately rewarded for what they do.
I wasn't looking for criticism.
Oh no,
I was very curious because you're one of 15 people in comics who actually has feet in both worlds and can move smoothly back and forth between them, it seems to me.
Another question I would ask is for artists who, why don't you write your own stuff?
Right.
Or not that's not a criticism for artists that don't. But it's a general question as to why are you satisfied in just drawing what other people have wrote and put in front of you? And maybe because they love what those writers give them.
Right.
So everybody has their own reasons for doing what they're doing. And
I love coloring what you give me.
you. So my answers are obviously going to be different from somebody else's. I have my own point of view of why I do things and what works for me. And Lee does, and Laura does, and Eric Larson does. But I think generally what we all have in common is that we love this art form.
Sure.
And we want to champion it, and we want stores like yours to be successful, because when you're successful, we're successful.
And that's why I have a store, is because I want you to be successful. And I also want to make some success off that. I mean, here. I don't. It's a beautiful thing.
It's just one big love fest.
It is, though. I mean, that's what comics are about. Comics, to me, are about your passion and sharing that passion with other people. And I've said this a couple of times in other contexts, but telekinetically setting people on fire with your brain. Like, oh, look at this thing, this is so great. And then they go, oh my God, it's so great, I'm going to tell 20 of my friends. There's not a better feeling in the world about an artist doing something they're passionate about and then being able to match that passion to a reader who is then going to go, oh, you were right. That's the greatest feeling in the world.
That's the passion I would encourage fans to follow, to find the people that are passionate about their work. I know there are people that only love DC Comics and people that only love Marvel Comics, or that only love what this creator does. I would suggest work a little harder and looking under every corner.
Sure.
Look at indie comics.
Yep.
I know that every faction of every genre and every company, there will be artists and writers that will light anybody up. You can find something in any of this, to not limit yourself to, well, I only like Batman.
Right.
Because you're missing out. So you've already taken the big step. You buy and read comic books, but there's so much out there to explore and be passionate about that I that's why I jump around the way I do, because I just see all these little lights and I chase after them. And that's when I come into a comic book store, I'm like, what haven't I seen before? What haven't I seen before? What's gonna light me up? And I always find something.
Yeah, I dig that. I can keep asking questions, but I think maybe I should ask if you guys in the audience have any questions that you would like to answer. Yes, please.
Just sort of on what you were talking about, do you find that doing your own work on our creative things is more, the demands are different just on the business side, and they get asked for different skills than doing work for a company? And because that might be, I'm thinking of why authors don't self-publish, because they don't want to be publishers. They want to be authors.
We were just talking about this earlier, actually, because Laura and I self-published for an entire year with a Madman spinoff called The Atomics. It was a superhero team.
The year 2000, right?
Yeah. And the quick answer to that question is the time it takes to do all the business stuff.
Takes away from the creative part.
And speaking of Eric Larson again, love this guy because he extended and said, you know, Image Comics, you're essentially self-publishing, but we have an office who works for you. So you can choose the paper you want, you know, the format, the frequency. You decide, and we just take this, and the rest is all your decision. And that's a really phenomenal.
Especially when ads cost so much money, they already have.
And they get cheaper printing costs. So that
Pretty much guaranteed penetration.
and that's why I kept saying the main difference is business stuff. If I do a Fantastic Four comic book, I'm not concerning myself with the business side at all. For me, it's purely creative. And even though I don't own and control those characters, the passion is there, the affection for the characters is there, and it's pure creativity. The only time I think about the business is when the check comes. And it's like, oh, we got paid for this. With your own stuff, that's also, the business side is also a blessing. Like I've got a t-shirt shop that has like dozens and dozens of designs. I decide when those designs go up or down and what I charge for those designs. Same with all the other merchandise. We've had Madman yo-yos and beach towels. I get to decide all that stuff. You know, I just finished a run of Silver Surfer I'm extremely proud of, but I can't say, let's make a Silver Surfer surfboard. You know, I can't do that. So the business side can also be a blast. So being able to make all those decisions is huge, but you're also taking time in making all those choices and taking all that responsibility. That does take away from the creative side, which for me is the main absolute reason, 99% of why I do what I do. I just want to do this creative stuff and tell stories that and have something here today that didn't exist yesterday. And then next month, a whole other thing that didn't exist before. And then to, like recently, Kevin Smith curated these collector cards for the San Diego Comic-Con and wanted Laura to be one of the cards. Or like he chose 10 people in the business and Laura was one of them. And they needed a picture. And she was off doing something. And while she was gone, it was like, I had this idea for a picture. It's one of my favorite photographs of anybody ever. I just splayed out all of the comics of ours that we had done together that were handy. And then when she got home, I said, sit there, click. It's just a perfect picture.
It's in the bug, it's the blue section.
Okay. But when you take the time as a creator to just kind of
That's the card, yeah.
every once in a while, you just look at what you've done. It's kind of like, ooh, it's
Like putting all those comics down. That wasn't even.
it's like we did that and that and that and that and that. It's kind of like, again, I just wanted one book I could be proud of.
Yeah.
And now hundreds of books later, it's like, look what we've done.
Yeah.
You know, it's thrilling.
Yeah.
What's that?
I have a lot of questions, but I think the one that sits with me the most is it was relatively easy to discover your work. It was relatively easy to discover Matt Wagner's work. And so many people who came out of Comico and that era because there just weren't so many publishers. Nowadays, there's so much being published. Some of it is phenomenal. I am never going to see it. And I'm curious, like, what you would do as a reader looking for the latest and greatest. I mean, you're like ALLRED, people are going to bring you things. But if you didn't have that, how would you go about finding what?
Do you all know what the previews catalog is? It's like a big phone book that comes out every month.
Sure.
I look through it every month. And
Pulls out pages that he
yeah, I tear the pages out. I want to see what that is. And so I'll usually have a tiny little stack of stuff that I want to look more into. And also visiting comic shops, a lot of stuff gets through the cracks. It maybe doesn't come through Diamond distributors.
Sure.
And so you're just constantly going, it's like we'll be driving somewhere, anywhere. comic shop, pull over and and like just what do they have that I've not seen before? So and that's fun. Treasure hunting is what it is, and you're looking for that next treasure. But it's hard to get. I don't even know how you do it. Going through the previous. What do you order and how many do you order?
We don't know how we do it either. I don't think it's a stupid job that I have. I've got the dumbest job in the world. Try to make order out of the chaos of all art in comics. It's stupid. I don't know how we do it. I really don't. But I love the fact that you love it, though. I love the fact that you go through previews with joy of, wow, whereas I'm like, oh, God. Oh, what's Marvel doing this month? Why are they doing 5 miniseries for this character? No, what's wrong with you?
And the challenge with previews, of course, is that, like, sure, for people who are in this room, that may be an option. Certainly, Brian has no choice.
Yeah.
But I think for a lot of readers out there who would find your work, for example, to be completely amazing, they're not going to go to previews, right? I mean, it's just not going to happen.
No, it's
previews is so hard for them to find.
There's so much luck involved. Ultimately, the greatest thing that can happen to you is word of mouth. Mm-hmm. If the people that like your stuff are vocal about it, then you won right there. If it's shy people that, oh, I really like this, but I just want to keep it to myself, then you're just going to be a cult band, you know? And so every time somebody tells me that, oh, my friend turned me on to this, or so-and-so told me about this, it's like, thank you. Mm-hmm. I'm so grateful. It means the world. So if there is something you're passionate about, and anything, music, TV shows, whatever, you got to speak up. Otherwise, it's going to go away. And and that's, again, one of the fun things about a place like a comic book store, because people just talk about what they love. Mm-hmm. So just hang out in a comic shop, and it's like, oh, why do you like that? You know, and you can quickly decide whether it's something you want to spend money on or not, or spend any time on. Or you can, but wow, there is something there that I didn't see otherwise. And that, I think, in life in general, that's one of my favorite things about living, is just talking about what other people are passionate about. It's a very valuable thing, and it's a fragile thing, because if you don't offer support to something that's budding and starting, you know, your favorite TV show may only last 6 episodes. Mm-hmm. You know, it's in all of that.
Yeah. And that, I mean, I'll tell you, that's a lot of the motivation of us having the graphic novel clubs, is to be able to speak to civilians and muggles. Well, right. I mean, that's what it is. And then also for us to really have a platform where we can focus and go, all of the staff think that this is the best comic book of the month. Oh. And it makes a difference, I think. There certainly, I don't think 100% of the people in the room would have read this book if we had to send it out, right? And you're all really, really happy that you read this book, right? So it works out kind of in the way that it's supposed to.
I know we'd love to hear why you like it at all.
This one's relatively easy for me. I knew that I loved it, not just from the part at the beginning of Broody Robinson and kind of the tie in there, but when the teddy bear was talking about rebelling versus conforming, and how sometimes the most difficult thing is to choose to conform and to follow that path. I was like, this is speaking to something. And I very much appreciated that, and how it continued to flow in all these interesting ways. And, you know, I'm assuming everyone here has read it, so I'm not going to talk in a spoilery way, or should I talk in spoilery ways? Okay. I'll
Send me spoilers.
The introduction of the family entities. I'm not as familiar with the DC universe. I'm learning it, and you kind of sparked some more of that interest to learn more about it and kind of what's going on in the source and all these different things. But it brought a level of structure to the face of the DC universe, if I could put it that way, that I find fascinating. And I'm wondering, I find it fascinating. I love it. I'm wondering if you would talk a little bit about what brought you to that and what drew you to that.
Again, the encyclopedia over here, he knows everything.
It's just the Kirby's source is a lot different than our source. That's one of the areas where we kind of veered off, just because of our background versus Kirby's background. He told the story from his point of view, and where we were rereading this the source and the family entities from our point of view. And so but we're both speaking to what's in our hearts and how we see the universe working.
And that's one of the things I'm really proud of, what is putting our heart into something. And my favorite creators do that too. It's all very personal to them. Whether it's a creator-owned character or a company-owned character, you can tell when somebody is passionate about what they're doing. And I think that comes out of the characters. And as much as I loved Bug as a child, even more now, he's just that much more precious to us.
Yeah. I want to know, just because we have Hamilton in the audience. Hamilton, did you read the book yet? What was the thing you liked the best about it?
The adventures.
The adventures? Yeah. What was there one part that like you thought was super exciting? It's okay if the answer's no. No? Okay, cool.
All of the parts were the most exciting.
Right on. I'm with you there. Miles, you've had your hand up for a while.
I had a question for Lee.
Yeah.
Do you see your writing style in this as more of a homage or emulation or satire at the Kirby's writing?
Not satire at all. Sort of emulation of the fact that I was trying to bring in the same sort of bombastic energy Kirby had, but not in a ironic or postmodern way. Just trying to recapture the excitement I felt when I read them as a kid. Homage, well, definitely, but it not just repeating what he had done, but trying to build on what he had done.
Thank you.
Yeah. Do you have a?
Yeah. I feel like with Madman at the kind of core of the story and maybe what drives it forward, and this is just my interpretation, I feel like love is pretty much key to the story. It's kind of like a love story in some sense, as well as like a superhero story and a team and family. But in reading in the back of the book the story that you wrote about how you guys met, and just thinking about your creative own work and like what drives that, but also the fact that you were a journalist before. Like what, and what you just said about so much of your creator own stuff being something you need to do. Like what are those things that you need to get out that drive that forward? Is it love, which is the first thing that I thought of, or is it like other things you see in the world? Because I feel like I see some of these things that show up in the collaborations that you all do with other folks as well. And maybe that's happenstance, but I wonder, why, what is it that you need to channel into the creator own stuff that informs that? Sorry, that's such a long rambling question.
No, I don't want to get too deep. I suffer from something called existential anxiety. Again, our dad was a psychologist. That's what he told me it is. And love, or specifically Laura, keeps me sane. From another early memory is a summer night, being put to bed and not being tired and not wanting to go to bed, and it was still kind of light outside, and laying in my bed, and the ceiling opening up and me seeing the universe, and then seeing that it doesn't have an ending. I don't want to upset anybody. She doesn't look like she's paying attention, so but I started screaming, and my mom came, and I tried to explain to her why I was upset, and I couldn't understand how there could be no end to the universe, that there had to be an end somewhere, and just started getting into all this existential stuff. And I wasn't even in school yet, so I had no concept of why this stuff was where it came from. But then getting into eternity and time concepts, how could it had to begin somewhere, but then what was before that? So, and I'm just rattling this stuff off to my mom and just getting more and more upset. And she was like, just, what are you going to do tomorrow? and she helped me focus on now and something that I can enjoy now and that I didn't need to concern myself about 3 trillion years from now, whether I'll be a part of it, of that existence or not, these kind of things. So this is, and I have those attacks every few years, and they're awful. And the one thing that always saves me is love. Friends, family. The most important person in my existence sits next to me right now, shares everything in my life. So of course that kind of stuff is going to be represented in my work because
It's just too deep.
yes, sorry, it's but it's my everything, and like whether you talk about the history of comic books and idiots thinking that it creates juvenile delinquency or that it's just mindless junk. To me, it's an art form. It's the ultimate art form in combining words and pictures. It's literature and art, and it can be the most personal art form there is because it only takes one person to do it, or you can get a bunch of people working together on a project. And with that is the interaction of us thinking, feeling beings and able to share ideas and emotions with each other. So the thing that makes me want to live is love. And it, whether it's an action story, an adventure story, science fiction story, there has to be a meaning behind the actions of the characters. And for me, I always go back to how these characters feel about each other, whether they resent each other, hate each other, jealous of each other, or love each other. And what I want in all of my stories is to have at least, even if there's not a happy ending, to have a motivating factors behind the characters I identify with, to have big hearts who care about other people and have love as a motivating force. So it's very key to my work. And because it's the only thing that pulls me out of these horrible attacks when they happen to me. It's the only thing. They can ruin me for weeks. And the only way I can function on a daily basis is those feelings that show me that there's a reason to get through it. Mm-hmm. And that's what works for me.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
That was beautiful. Yeah. Yeah. I like, thank you for applauding my pain. Yeah, Mike. Oh, okay. Right. I have a question from the internet, which I actually think is from Hamilton's dad, who's also named Hamilton. Well, no, that's actually. Oh, okay. Well, that answered the earlier question. Super cool. What inspired Kazuko? How did the idea for what is that?
How did the idea for lettered
look evolve? There we go.
Kuzuko is well, anyone who's followed my Twitter feed knows that I am a huge anime watcher. You know, and so I just put an anime character in her and the talking teddy bear are both anime characters. The lettering style is something we suggested to the letterer.
Name.
Yeah. So to make it her lettering style when she doesn't speak, is that what we're talking about? Okay.
The descriptives.
Yeah. That is something they do in manga. Basically, they'll do little side comments, or they'll have straight verb action for instead of sound effects. And so I just lifted that straight from manga.
Nice.
Thief. I love it.
Let's talk a little bit about process and craft, maybe. Since we've been talking about art theory mostly here. Tell me, how did you guys work together on this? Did you Lee write a full script for this? Did you guys just sort of talk it out? Like, what was your creative process here?
Mike first proposed that we do, or talked with Gerard about doing a series with with Bug. And then I came up with a general plot outline. I kind of talked the broad strokes with Mike. And then I did the 2-page treatment for Gerard and the editors at DC. And after their approval, I took that, and then I do full scripts. And I plot out what the issues are going to be at. I get in my head work out basically the general idea for the plot. And then I start writing dialogue. I just get a blank page on my computer, and I just start doing dialogue streams and having the characters talk to each other. I already have the action pretty well mapped out, but to get the characters, I just do dialogue and work out the panels from there.
In terms of like the treatment, the earlier steps, was there a lot of editorial conversation, or were they, oh wow, this sounds fantastic, just go?
Not much. We originally proposed it as a 12-issue run.
Okay.
And they cut it back to 6.
Right.
We wanted to use a few characters that they put off limits. Commandy was going through the Commandy challenge, so they didn't want us to use Commandy. They were doing something with Demon, so we couldn't use Demon.
Right.
And then they didn't want us to use too much of the New Gods because of Mr. Miracle
right.
they had in the works. So if you actually read Buzz, the New Gods don't appear except actually in 2 panels. The rest are all flashbacks. We just made it look like they were into the series. So that was pretty much the extent of the editorial.
But that also helped motivate us towards doing all the other the Left Alone Jack Kirby stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
So again, hidden treasures.
Yeah.
You can't work on these main characters, so let's pre-bias the minor ones.
Though it sounds to me like getting cut from 12 to 6 is that's a pretty big change, like in the structure of a story, right? Like,
yeah, well, that's the reason why Deadman and Manhunter are both in the same issue. That's the reason why the second part in the Himalayas, there's the outside scene and the inside scene. Outside in the snow and then inside the cave, those are supposed to be 2 different issues.
And we cut characters too.
Yeah, we cut a whole bunch of characters. There were going to be a lot of the other Kirby World War II characters.
Right.
And we supposed in just a couple. So
yeah. Do you do thumbnails of your own at all, or any other visual things so you can get a sense of how the page?
He does.
Yeah, I actually talked about this in my Twitter feed. But after an issue is published, I go up through and do my liner notes. I do little stick figures of certain key panels, not the whole thing, but just the key panels. And then I send them to Mike. I put them in the script. I put the thumbnail or my stick figures, and then I put art references for Mike.
Very helpful for especially me too. It's like the old Sandman.
The coloring.
Yeah, because there's a specific time frame he wanted.
Basically, anytime I ask an artist to draw something specific, I find an art reference, show them what I'm doing.
Yeah, when we first started working professionally together, his scripts were like college courses. It would be a panel, and he would explain why this character is in here and what his origins were and where he came from and what his birthday was and what his favorite chocolate flavor of ice cream was. And it was like, oh man, it just insane fun. But I value, he jokes about the stick figures, but in any collaboration, it's really important for the artist to get into the writer's mind as much as possible, because I can please myself, but I also want to please my collaborator. I want to know what they're thinking and like, how did they see this composition? And so I find those very helpful. It's less guessing, and I can still decide to do it differently if I can, suggest another way of doing it. So I love the way he writes scripts. I think they're priceless.
Yeah. Are there things that you in your head wrote it a certain way, and then Mike came back to you, and then that changed the way you saw the rest of the story? The answer can also be no.
Not really.
Okay.
Actually, I had the scripts. I pretty much had most of the scripts done before Mike.
Okay.
He's fast too.
I wrote most of the scripts before the second issue was started.
Wow. 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 How long altogether did it take you, would you say, to script out the 6 issues?
It's not a question of time because we had to go through editorial process on the first one. But the last 3 I wrote in the last 3 issues I wrote in 3 weeks.
Wow. Wow. It's quick.
So by that time we had the editors thought we had a feel for it. We knew what it was because there wasn't very much editorial. Sure.
And visually, that's priceless because I'm going to draw something differently if I know what's going to be called back later, or what this is going to look like, or what I am moving towards. That will play a large part in what's in front of me.
Yeah, part of the reason I wanted to keep ahead of them on this is because in the story, there's the dominoes page where we show you what's going to happen in the rest of the 6 issues. I wanted to nail that down. So I wrote that, and then I wrote I didn't know how I was going to get there.
I like, here's a panel, Mike, draw 10,000 dominoes. and make them spell out this and form this shape, and okay. Yeah.
I asked you before this is what I think we're doing.
Well, this is very different than what you usually get from most writers, right? Because the way comics production works, you're usually only getting the script that you're working on, and I suspect that with some people you've worked on, with books that
I've waited for been done with an issue. To me, there's no excuse for a writer or an artist to ever have to be waiting for the next script.
Yeah.
Because it just takes so much longer to draw something than it does to type something.
Yeah, because I can think of at least one of your collaborators who's famous for writing people pages 1 page at a time, like day by day. Like, oh my God, there's a deadline. He needs another page so he can draw.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
I don't draw. I don't work well that way.
Yeah.
I need to see the overall shape.
Yeah.
And so it's like, well, I'll just work on this until I get the whole story, but that's been very rare. I've rarely had that problem.
Yeah. So you get a full script from him, and you have the shape in your head. You know where it's going. What do you do when you have that full script? What's the thing that you do? How do you break that down?
What I always do, even if it's my own script, I then write these shorthand. I draw these little shorthand doodle thumbnails right on the script.
Okay.
So I don't have to go looking for it, and I keep them very loose because I want. How do I say this? I want all of the energy to happen in one place. And in the past, when I've done detailed layouts and then redrew it for the final polished page, something in the raw stage gets lost, and it either becomes too polished or there was just something there that I can't recreate. And so I don't want that to exist anymore. I want to go from the thumbnail step to the final drawing and then inking it. And sometimes I'll even do really loose pencils and do a lot of the drawing in the inking. So there's not a lot of repetition, and it just keeps the flow, keeps the energy going. So I don't ever want to overwork anything. And then when I do put a lot of detail into something, it has more of a punch. Because so it's all about, keeping things going. So as long as I know how I'm going to compose that and lay that out, I know what, that line right there is the flow of the action of the arm, for instance, that sort of thing. As long as I know what it is, nobody else needs to know what it is. So I can just quickly rough out my layouts. Then from there, I know how I'm going to put the panels on the page, what panels need to be bigger than others, what panels are establishing shots so that people know where you are all the time. It's really important to me to know where you are. So establishing panels are important. And then once you know that all those characters are right there, then you can cut away to close-ups and whatnot and build the emotions and the conflicts from person to person, panel to panel. And you can decide which one needs to be biggest. So you want the overall page to look good, but you also want the individual panels to have flair to them too, and the proper expression. And so from that I then do another little rough of, okay, that's how that's going to break down, and then I go right to the page.
Okay. And so that thumbnail on the script, is this like a 1-day project, a 3-hour project? Okay.
Yeah. Unless it's one of Lee's scripts, I can do it in 1 day.
Okay.
Yes.
I think he's listening.
All right. So you start laying out the page on. Are you drawing on pen and ink, or are you digital?
I'm trying to learn digital. I prefer all on the paper.
What's your output like? Are you a page a day guy, or?
I pencil everything and then I go back and ink everything.
Right.
So, and I think generally I can pencil faster than I can ink, but I enjoy inking more because it's like the icing, it's where I take the extra care. Because technically I should be faster inking, but again, I just kind of want to get all the bones on the page.
Right.
And then I want to fill everything out with the line art and the textures and the blacks and the whites and the balance. So I take a little more time with the inking, at least with my own art. When I'm inking somebody else, I can work very quickly because I'm very faithful.
Right.
Like I'm inking Rich Tomaso now.
Right.
And I can be very, very faithful to his pencils.
Yeah.
And very quick. So it's fun and fast. I forgot the original question.
Well, I actually don't remember what the original question was.
Page output.
Page output. Right, yeah.
Well, yeah, I think I average. I think I can do. When I was doing Bug, I was also doing Silver Surfer. Bug was supposed to. I knew Silver Surfer. By the way, Silver Surfer was exactly what we wanted it to be. We had that ending in mind. Like when people, Silver Surfer's being canceled, like, all good things must come to an end. And this was the ending we had planned. Silver Surfer is exactly what we wanted it to be, except it took longer to get to that end than we thought. And I made the mistake of drawing the first issue of Bug really fast just to show the folks at DC how serious I was about it. And they were like, "Oh, well, let's move up the schedule." So I'll never do that again. And that's what they did, because they also wanted to be around. They wanted to be part of the Jack Kirby 100th celebration and all that kind of stuff.
Well, and I also think that some of the Young Animal stuff was behind schedule, and it was like, "Oh, Mike's getting it done, so
move him up."
Yeah.
So they overlapped. So I know that I'm capable of doing quality work.
You've done up to 2 books in 1 month, 2 penciling.
Almost. I think I can maintain my quality at 30 pages a month. If I'm pressed to do more than 30 pages a month, then I have to start, making some shortcuts, and I don't ever want to do that. It becomes frustrating, and that's when it's not fun anymore.
Yeah.
So I know where my limits are, but I'm most comfortable averaging probably somewhere between 20 and 30 pages a month.
All right, so you pencil the page, you scan it then?
Laura does.
After he inks it.
You really want to hear this? We came up with this process, and it's really interesting. Go for it. And go.
Well, you can only really do this if you are your own colorist, or if you live with the colorist, because he does his the inking, just the line art, and then I scan that in, and then I give it back to him, and then he does a lush. As you can see, there's modeling and everything, and then I scan that in. I keep everything separate, so all the modeling I just take. I make that any color I want. And so there's no like computer rendering. It's all Mike's art.
Yeah.
But it's all her choices with the colors.
Right.
And so if I do textures and modeling with a pencil or a watercolor brush, gray tones, she then changes those things with the color, still maintaining, because she has that separate line art preserved. So I can get experimental with the textures with the modeling.
Right.
She changes them into colors, but they often retain the texture.
Right.
Well, they always retain it.
As opposed to a computer brush stroke or something, which looks like a computer
So
brush.
whatever you see on the page is all Mike's rendering, shading, everything is Mike's art.
Well, Laura's style, she prefers flat colors, which I prefer. And so by doing just subtle rendering with the modeling, it retains that super cool classic flat color look that Laura does so well. Yes, all the drawing is all mine, but the choices in mood and how deep you make those textures, that's all you.
Thank you.
So, historically, at least, generally it was pencil, then letters, then inks, then colors. That's the normal process. It sounds like that's not quite how it works with you guys. Is that right? Because the lettering is going out of house?
Yeah.
You're penciling and inking, coloring it, and then it's going out to be lettered?
Yeah, and that's the
That's pretty much how everybody works anymore.
Yeah.
Okay.
The artist has to guess
where the
how much room it will be needed for the text, and that's one of the problems that happens. It's often called the Marvel method, where a lot of the dialogue and final scripting is done after the artist has drawn the book. That's ripe for disaster. I worked a little bit in that direction with Dan Slott, but he provided enough information that I knew enough and was able to give him the freedom to then rewrite certain dialogue, but I still was given dialogue. So I knew what the characters were saying to each other. I knew how they needed to react, the expressions they needed to have on their faces.
and how much dialogue was on it.
Yeah, how much was on
Because
the
if you
page.
draw something and then the dialogue's going to cover everything you just drawn.
But when I hear about how somebody drew something and then the writer virtually rewrites it all, I haven't done that.
Yeah.
I've heard of people that are comfortable with that. For me, I want to know the story I'm telling, whether I wrote it or the writer that I'm working with. And I don't want to guess at how they might alter it significantly. So it's a way I don't prefer to work. But so I wouldn't call the way I worked with Dan that. But the way I worked with Dan was very different from how I worked with other writers.
Right.
In fact, every writer has something very unique to them that I could read a script of any of my collaborators and know pretty quickly who the writer is. That they are like fingerprints in that way.
I'm super curious about color, because this is not, first of all, we've never been able to talk to a color here before. And
She's real.
and I've never, and I've like, even in like the stupidest way, like I can't do coloring books. Like I look at them and I get overwhelmed by what your possibilities are. So how do you narrow those possibilities? How do you take a piece of artwork and go, this is the color that I'm choosing, here's what the dominant color on the page is? This seems like a skill that's just sort of fourth dimensional to me.
I don't know. Usually when I'm coloring a book, it has to feel right and look right. And then I'll put all my pages up on my other computer. And I like to know if you're in a place, I want you to feel like you're in a place. And if you go to a different place, that you'll be at a different place, that it doesn't all feel the same place. Mike's helped with his color deficiency because if there's not enough depth or contrast, he'll say that kind of looks the same. So I think I've gotten more to where I do more contrast, so it's more pleasing. to Mike. But no,
Bye, Hamilton.
Bye, Hamilton.
is it past your bedtime?
Yeah, it is past her bedtime.
Sorry about the existential anxiety stuff. I know.
She's a really nice kid. Sorry, go on.
No, I was just saying that to me, it has to. I have to have a feel for. It's just. I have to like it and have to have a feel for it. I don't know.
She has amazing instincts.
Yeah. Do you select a color theme per page, or do you? I mean, I
I don't know. It depends on what I'm working on. So it's
well,
it's all
let's stick it with
for the bug.
working with Bob. We're working with Mike in particular. I mean, you guys must have a shorthand to a certain extent because you're a married couple and right down the hall from one another.
Yeah, Mike's really never said for me to change anything, so I don't know. And I kind of know what he likes.
Because early on, I would say what I liked and didn't like, and so when on the rare occasions where it'll be like, oh, I kind of saw that as a brighter place,
Right.
a sunnier place.
Oh, that's what I do ask though. When Mike, he does a lot of covers, and so when he does a cover and hands it to me, and I color it, and then he says, "Oh, I was thinking the background should be red." I go, "Okay, tell me before I color it." So then when he gives me something, I'll say, "Any ideas?" And he'll give me his ideas, and that helps out a lot.
Right.
Because I like hearing him before than after.
But she does do what you're talking about, and just to clarify what she was saying, where we've now changed environments, or there's a conflict, then the colors will address that.
Yeah.
She does have some certain sets of palettes too, right?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. I don't want to talk. Oh, I was going to bring up. We had a break-in. She makes these palettes, and she labels them all, hundreds of them, like Frank Einstein's eye color.
Why did everybody, like Captain America's eyes, his suit, anybody I've ever colored, I have them in my color swatches, labeled. Yeah, they took 20 years of color swatches, because they took my back too. So, and then I had to get because I used two computers. I had to get new computers and to try to get my colors to acclimate both computers.
This was 5 years ago, and we're still whining about it.
Now we have cameras all over our house and and that ring thing that goes off all the time. But no, I've remade my swatch palette.
And we've learned where all the bear traps are.
Am I wrong that she's been your exclusive colorist for ever? Ish?
90%.
Yeah.
Every once in a while, I've had a different colorist, either just for fun or somebody was contracted with something I was working on.
Right.
But that's rarely happened. And for as long as I can remember now, they asked for her before they asked for me. So
Nice. I like that.
yeah, she's coloring the new Catwoman series that Joelle Jones asked for her.
Cool.
And they've worked together before on Lady Killer. So I'm starting to let other people.
Mike keeps me so busy, so it's
Well, that was my other question too. Like when you're working with other people, is it because you color so much of his work? Is it a shift to like, oh, like that person's art style is different?
working for other artists is different, and I hope. But with Joelle, I've colored her before, and I know her style, and it's easy for me.
Yeah.
Other artists would,
Like Jaime Hernandez or Gilbert Hernandez, they're similar in some ways to what I would want. So
yeah. Plus, they usually give me what they want in a little sketch. It's like pretty much just do what they want in it.
well, at Jaime, he does a full color pencil coloring thing. It's like, why don't you just color it yourself?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's real. But it's flattering that they ask for her.
That's fascinating. It's like a whole field I don't understand at all. Seth.
Sorry.
No, sorry.
Yeah, well, so one thing I don't think we've heard this evening is your takes on editorial and what You don't have to name names for obvious reasons.
I'll name names.
Oh, okay, well, I mean, make it exciting. But what editorial styles do you work well with? The styles, for lack of a better term, and like, how do you know when you've got a good partnership with the editor, and the feedback is coming in a way that you're receptive to, versus somebody who is like, "Why are you drawing feet? We need no feet in this panel," or whatever.
Honestly, I'm not just trying to be nice, but I've never had any problems with any editors ever. Some are more hands-off than others. Some are full-on collaborators. Axel Alonso was almost a co-creator with Peter Milligan and I when we did X-Force and Ecstatics. He threw ideas at us left and right, and a lot of them we picked up and ran with. Shelley Bond, the same. She's virtually a co-creator of iZombie. A lot of the stuff that we ran with were her suggestions. And I've had editors who suggested stuff that I just ignored and that it was never brought up again. So there was no conflict there. Sure. Because I knew that they were suggestions. I wasn't being disrespectful. I just knew that they were throwing ideas out, which I could, or, like, again, it's a suggestion. So and I settle name names because ultimately it was a wonderful experience. But Mike Carlin was my editor on Superman Madman. And here was the first time Superman was teaming up with a creator-owned character. And so it was amazing to me that I was allowed to do anything I want on that book. Except I had a scene where in the script I wrote that Superman and Frank Einstein, Madman, were sitting at a swing set and just talking about existential stuff. And Mike said, "We can't have Superman in a swing set."
But that was bizarre because Superman and Madman merged. That was totally cool, but he couldn't be in a swing.
Did he explain why?
He said Superman's always vigilant, right?
Yeah, he's always has to be proactive and whatnot.
He would rely on
Yeah.
I've been swinging without a swing.
Where were you?
Pre-All-Star Superman, where sitting on clouds was acceptable.
But again, it's they had their reasons, but it's like, okay, fine. So I just had Superman, Supermaned up while Frank was in the swing set, and it's all good. But it was such a gratifying experience. I loved working with him. Mike Carlin, the editor. So, but yeah, there's little moments like that happen where somebody's like, and sometimes it's almost always, weren't these two guys supposed to be here, or what happened to him? That's very useful. To where you've forgotten something, or you forgot to connect something. So it's very valuable to have that editorial, backup. And Jamie Rich, who's one of my very best friends, he works at DC now, has been the editor of almost all of my creator-owned stuff that I've done myself without collaboration. And he's always there with support and terrific ideas and enthusiasm, which is really important. If you get the impression that your editor doesn't really care what you're working on, then there's so many missed opportunities there. When somebody's excited to be working with you, you feel that support, and you want to do good for them. Lee told this story recently about he turned in a script early because he wanted that editor to like, good job. He turned it in early, and for whatever reason, he didn't see it.
He didn't see it till the very last day it was due.
And so Lee like writes, "Hey, you haven't responded to the script I turned in. I turned it over a week ago." It's like, oh yeah, here it is.
No big deal.
But there are times where the editor is your sounding board, and it's real. They're the first person. They're your first audience. They're the first person you want to hear in the crowd going, yeah. And so that feedback is really valuable.
Do you ever find that the editor is intimidated by you or your reputation?
Never.
No.
Nope, I've not had that. That would be awesome. No,
He would probably stop.
they wouldn't see me throwing tables over anyway, because and almost everything is email anymore. It's even rare to talk on the phone anymore.
Sure.
But
That weird though? That seems weird.
it's actually preferable. Is it? Yeah, because everything's in writing.
Right. Doesn't like talking on the phone.
Well, it's getting harder and harder for me to hear on the phone. But I recently had somebody call me up but it was in a negotiating situation, and they said, "I'm just so nervous to be talking to you right now." I'm like, dude. But no, it's weird when somebody even says something like that, because I don't know.
He was just trying to get on your good side.
Well, whatever.
We're almost at 2 hours here, and honestly, I feel like I could keep talking for another 2 hours, but we should probably start wrapping this up. I want to ask you a couple of questions. One of which is what are you working on next? What's the next thing? What's the next horizon? What can you talk about that is not secret?
I don't think anything, right? Is there anything we can talk about that we're working on?
Not a thing?
I don't think so.
All right.
No, at least not on camera.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, understood. Understood.
Yeah, I mean, I can confidentially tell each of you. I can tell you this. I am working with Lee on something, which it is again stems from childhood affection. Okay, so there's that. I've got a new Madman Universe project, all new concept.
Yay.
So that's in the pipeline. I've actually got the first issue almost completely done. Laura just started coloring it. I think I can say that Peter Milligan and I are working on something which you might guess what we might be working on together.
Very good.
And
or maybe not.
And then what for me is a lifelong passion project, something I've always wanted to do. It's music oriented. And it's big and fancy, super high-end slipcase, multiple covers for different countries. It's one of the biggest, most ambitious things that's come from me in one big chunk, I think, ever. In that it's not coming out in comic books first. It's going to come out,
The huge graphic novel.
Yes, it's going to be like, and here it is.
How is that as a challenge for you? Because you've always worked serialized.
Yeah, right.
Is it different? I mean, is it the structure of
it is different.
of not having that every 22 pages or whatever the number actually is these days that it has to have a cliffhanger?
It requires incredible discipline because I have to make sure I produce a certain amount of pages to make sure that I stay on schedule and that it's released when it's supposed to be released, which I think will be about a year from now. And that's not even set in stone because I have to continually prove to the publisher that I'm going to finish it when I said I'm going to.
Right. Is the deadline a lash, like a positive lash to keep you motivated, or
always? Always. Yeah, very much so. It can be frustrating, especially when I really wanted to do more with that panel,
right?
That sort of thing. When that happens, and it's rare, fortunately, but it can be very frustrating. But at the same time, to make sure that I do put everything in there that I wanted in there, I got to make sure. I've become very much an efficiency expert, and I think Laura can attest to this. Probably close to 15 years ago, I started using these daily desk calendar, date calendars.
Yeah.
So every day, I will write what I get done. I might put a little personal journal-y kind of thing in there, but mostly it'll be like inked pages such and such today. And so I can go back over 10 years, well past 10 years now, and know exactly what I was doing on that day, what I produced that day, and I can do the math. So if I'd done the math, I could have told you exactly how many pages I produced and this and that by just, well, I did this of this and I did this of this.
Right.
And that's been very useful. So I know if I look on that, it's like, wow, I didn't do anything yesterday and something weird happened. And then, oh, that's because they came over and their left ear fell off and we had to tape it back on.
Right.
So, you can pretty much tell exactly what you need to get done and what you need to do. And just weird, stupid little things like it's faster if I walk this way instead of that way.
Sure.
Like,
Sure.
that sort of stuff starts.
But does that help as, don't take this the wrong way, but as you're getting older, right? Like to be able to find the efficiencies in the work?
Yeah. In fact, I personally, you all have your opinions, but I feel like each year over the past 5 years, my work has drastically improved.
I would agree.
So I've been happy with my progress and even more importantly, excited about the next steps I'm taking.
Yeah.
And this big book, which means so much to me, what I've done on it so far, I'm extremely proud of and can't wait for people to see it.
Nice.
Because I know other people will feel similar to me about the subject that I do.
Yeah.
And it's going to be really gratifying to share that and to then hopefully feel like I did the absolute best that I could in the time that I did it.
Nice. That's really great. The last question, the place I'd like to end with is, I think of these video interviews as, in a way, as comic book college. Like, because we're talking to so many artists and so many creators and so many different things. So I'd like you to sort of take a second and think about what kind of advice you might give to someone who's watching these at home, trying to figure out comics, trying to figure out where their place in comics, how do they break into comics, what can they do to make better comics, or just be better at craft in general. And maybe let's start with Lee. What kind of piece of advice would you give to a writer?
2 things. First, read outside comics. 90% something else, 10% comics. That's what I'd recommend. Second, make your deadlines.
Yeah. Very good.
If you're lucky enough to have deadlines.
Sure.
And if you don't have deadlines, make your own.
Make your own deadlines. That's a good one, yeah. Laura, for colorists who might be like, I'm thinking about going into this as a field.
I have no idea.
I have no idea. Well, that's fine.
Make your deadlines. I mean, I'm the last person on the book, so usually when I get it, we need it tomorrow. Here you go.
That's important.
Yeah.
That I've seen her suffer this over and over again, being the last in that train.
Yeah.
Man.
Yeah, I've pulled a lot of all-nighters.
And everybody along the line needs to consider that if these writers who decide they're going to take this much time,
Right.
everybody suffers down the line for that. And ultimately the colorist is like, I have how long to do this?
Right.
Yeah.
So,
It's like, this has to be in the printer in 3 days. Here you go.
What's the most number of pages you colored in a single day?
Oh, in a day? Well, it depends on the pages, but I can usually color a book in a week.
Okay.
7 days is good. I'd like a little bit longer, but
So 3 or 4 pages a day, give or take.
I've done it less.
she's done some marathons, which she should get a trophy for. I'll get you a trophy.
Yeah, but the colors is like the lowest on the totem pole when it comes to time frame.
I've been asked this question before, and I've thought about it a lot. So, and this is the answer I'm comfortable giving.
Yeah.
And it regards talent.
Mm-hmm.
And I think talent is an intense interest in something. And if you want that talent to increase, you have to increase the intensity of your interest. And the best way to do that is to do everything you can to enjoy it. I've found people that have talent and they lose interest in it and it just goes away. Maybe they revisit it every once in a while. But if they maintain that interest, again, by going into a comic shop and always finding stuff to inspire you and get you excited, then in the case of art, you will keep drawing. And if that interest is there, the more you draw, the better you'll get at it. And the better you get at it, the more you'll enjoy it. And that it just keeps building upon itself.
It's like a virtuous cycle.
Exactly. So as long as you can just keep fueling that fire and don't get discouraged, as long as you love what you're working on and keep that interest, that talent is guaranteed to grow. And with talent and quality comes success. People will notice it. You'll get hired. People will pay you to do that sort of thing, and et cetera, et cetera.
If you can keep your deadlines.
or make unreasonable ones. Very good, very good. I want to thank you guys. I mostly want to thank you for this book because it was a blast. It was fun. Yay! It was everything that we want from a comic book. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So thank you guys very much for Bug. If you're watching at home and you haven't read this yet, I hie thee to a comic book store. Go to your library. If you have to, go to Amazon, but go to a comic shop or a library first. This is a great comic, and read it. And I know it looks silly or something, inconsequential, but it's not. It's the real deal. This is comics. This is pure comics. Thank you, Lee. Thank you, Laura. Thank you, Mike, for coming out.
Thanks for having us, Brian. Thank you, people.
Yep.
Thanks.
Thank you so much.
Next month's book, I forgot my copy at home. I only have one copy right now, but I can't hold it up. It's Young Francis by Hartley Lynn. Hartley Lynn is the real name of. He used to go by the pseudonym of Ethan Riley, and he did a book called Pope Hats, and it's a fantastic comic. He puts out one issue every 2 years, maybe. And he goes by a pseudonym, so no one knows who he is, but you guys are going to really love this book, too. And so that's coming next month. Our meeting is on June 13th at 6 p.m. for the public signing and 8 p.m. for the meeting. And I hope you guys all come to that as much as you came to this, because I think you're really going to like that one, too. That's what I have for you this month. Thank you very much. Thank you, Jordan, for doing the show. Thank you, audience, for coming out. Thank you, Liz and Emma and Nathan and Doug and Julie, who's not here, for being the greatest staff that anyone could have so that I can continue to do this stuff. And thank you guys for making comics, and read more comics, man. Comics! Thank you.